Hello, everyone. Welcome to your newest episode of the Cosmic Matrix podcast with your host, myself, Laura Matsu, and my husband, Bernhard Gunther. And on this episode, we are going to talk about, or ask the question rather, is the age of gurus over? We're going to talk about this Dalai Lama situation, which basically went very viral. For those who don't know, there's a video that went viral. I think it was on Twitter first or on social media that basically showed the Dalai Lama asking a young boy on stage to suck his tongue. And it's been the conversation amongst many people in the spiritual community for the past few days. So we're going to discuss that. We're going to talk about cognitive dissonance, positive projections. We're going to speak about Bernhard's article where he talked about this incident and the Tibetan tradition and history and the shadow of the Tibetan history. We're going to discuss the trauma response, or rather the natural response of disgust when it comes to sexual abuse and anger as well. We're going to also talk about the Saturn in Pisces and how it relates to his chart and the issue with projecting your hate and anger towards any of these people from a spiritual perspective. We're also going to talk about how the age of religions is changing. We're going to talk about the concept of follow the teachings and not the teacher, and much more. And for those who don't know, we always have a second hour where we go much deeper into the topics of these podcasts. You can sign up. I think it's like $11 a month still. And you can sign up at veilofreality.com and you'll see it under membership. So if you join, you'll get access to the second hour of every podcast where we go deeper on each topic. So on this second hour of this podcast, we're going to talk about how this kind of fall from grace that a lot of gurus tend to go through relates to an evolutionary condition in evolutionary astrology called the second spiritual state. We're going to talk about how that relates to being highly spiritually evolved, but you can also have psychological stuff to still work through. We're going to talk about how asuras, which are basically very powerful occult forces that work for the side of evil, I guess you could say, can take over teachers. We're going to talk about the issues with just, I'm going to be my own teacher. And we're going to also share some spiritual, personal experiences with this guru lineage, I guess you could say, with my own experiences and the disillusionment I've gone through personally. We're also going to talk about a really big topic in religion, which is suppressing sexuality and what is the difference between suppression and transmutation. And then where do we go from here? Like, it seems that, at least in my own experience, a lot of the people that I've looked up to in the past few years have shown me that they're humans, that they're nothing that I would personally worship, and that I need to carve my own path. And I think a lot of people are at this turning point right now.
Excellent. So, we're starting off. We want to talk about this Dalai Lama situation, as you call it. And some of you may be aware of it, some not. And there has been, as Laura mentioned at the introduction, this video going around on, I think you're right, it started on Twitter.
Yeah.
And this video clip of the Dalai Lama, like hugging this young boy, actually also kissing on the lips. And then there's this pause and touching on the shoulder. And then the Dalai Lama asked the little kid to suck his tongue, suck my tongue. And that created a lot of uproar, right? You can check out the video. It's also on my website in the article I wrote on this event called the Dalai Lama Suck My Tongue Incident, Tibetan Tradition History and the Shadow. So that's on my website, veilofreality.com. Now, you may ask, why do we actually want to focus on this issue? A lot of people said there's a distraction, harmless events. There's so much sexual abuse, pedophilia already. Where's the client list from Epstein and all this? All valid questions. But, the way we looked at it and processed, and especially within the spiritual community, we have seen some very interesting reactions, a lot of defense and apologies regarding the Dalai Lama and all of that. And that raised some very big red flags in light of this dark age of Kali Yuga, and also how evil operates in our world very covertly, which most people have no awareness of. And also the distortion and the condition of history, or the conditioned worship and admiration of religious spiritual celebrities, like very famous gurus, so to speak, as the Dalai Lama is as well. So we really want to dive deeper into this whole topic, not only also from a psychological, but also esoteric, spiritual, and occult perspective. So there were two kinds of reactions. I have to say, from what we're seeing, the majority of people saw right away there's something very off. And if you watch the video, that clip itself, I feel the normal reaction which I perceived, and you can share shortly as well, was like I felt a disturbing emotion coming, or something feels very off. This is not right. Some icky energy, almost like a sensation of disgust that something is not right, right? Mm-hmm. Beyond this like image or appearance or just playful stuff, right? And I want to like specifically hint at, when you look at this video clip, for me, what was very insightful was the moment His Holiness touches the boy's shoulder, and there was like few seconds, 2, 3, 4 seconds, up to 5, a pause before he asks, "Suck my tongue." And in that pause, I sensed his whole energy shifting. Something else came through almost like this very like creepy older guy has this sexual attraction to this young boy. Something else came through, like an azuric force. Like almost he forgot himself in this moment where he's at, and then asked the boy to suck his tongue. And I also saw and sensed that the boy felt very uncomfortable. And that was very disturbing because all the adults were cheering and laughing, kind of like, oh, it's so funny, right? So that was just very disturbing. So for me, it's obvious, oh my God, here we go. You know, this is some pedophilia energy right there. And most people, I have to say, I think I saw that as well right away. They trusted the instinctive gut insight, right? The somatic experience.
A few things came to mind. Well, number one thing that you didn't touch on is that the kid's body language was showing obvious signs of discomfort, pulling back. You know, that's very clear. And then also, we have to understand that like body language, this realm of science that we've spoken about on other podcasts called interpersonal neurobiology, which is basically the science of how our nervous systems respond to one another, can also show us that when we watch someone in discomfort, a part of our nervous system should ideally feel discomfort as well. It's part of how our nervous systems entrain to one another. Right. So, and one thing that also came up is I realized that a lot of people, even when I commented, put like the barfing emoji on the video and stuff, because that's actually the natural response. So what I've learned from healing my own trauma, especially around sexual assault, is that on a somatic level, sexual assault survivors often need to get into feelings of disgust and anger in order to heal. And I'll explain why that is. It's because disgust is an emotion that shows you, move away from this. This is not good for you. This is not something that feels right? So if someone, for example, is trying to engage with you sexually and you're not really attracted to them or you're not really into them, it will be natural for you to actually feel some level of disgust so that you move away from them, right? And what isn't a normal response to abuse, but is actually the more common thing, or pretty common, I wouldn't say it's most common, having adults say it's okay and not do anything, cheering and laughing, because if a bystander or even someone in the community knows the abuse is happening and they don't protect the child, there's like a secondary trauma that takes attachment trauma that actually happens. And I think the thing is, this is crazy because we've literally watched an 85-year-old man ask like a 9-year-old or something boy to suck his tongue live on stage. And there's people who are so caught in their heads and ability to rationalize anything that they can't feel that disgust. They're just like, you know, they think it's okay. And then imagine if like the president, well, let's take the most triggering person, Donald Trump. Imagine if Donald Trump asked a young 9-year-old girl to do this on stage. They would be throwing him in prison. Yeah. And then people bring in the cultural differences. I personally think that that's people trying to cobble together a rationalization for why it happened when the large majority of people are like, gross, this is wrong, you know, period. And that actually gave me hope in humanity that a lot of people were able to see that. It wasn't their own shadow. It wasn't their own shit. Disgust and anger is a natural response for having abuse done to you or witnessing abuse done to another person.
Yeah, that's very important. We're going to dive into this deeper, into the whole shadow work, shadow projections, negative and positively, which is a big part of our work. But in this instance, it doesn't mean that your shadow get triggered if you feel disgust and discomfort, even anger at this situation.
Well,
it's very obvious.
I would say that it depends on each person. Like your own shadow definitely can get entangled in it, but it doesn't mean that disgust and anger in itself is your shadow. Disgust and anger actually have a purpose in our biology. Disgust, evolutionary speaking, will prevent us from eating foods that will make us sick, from doing things that will make us sick. That's its function, right? And you can apply this to human sexual relationships. You can apply this to anything. So it has a natural intelligence to it. It's there for a reason, basically.
Yeah. And the reason why I also want to talk about this as well is because it goes way deeper. And because we saw then over the past few days, a lot of Dalai Lama apologists, rationalizing it really intellectualizing and pulling the tradition card,
and they're all pulling the same excuse.
It's like I just recently wrote about. It's like almost an NPC hive mind, the vertical group entity. Oh, tradition. We Westerners are ignorant. We don't understand tradition, and becomes very like mental gymnastics to justify it. And it was just mentally. You notice that. And not even tuning into the energy. It's like, tradition, we don't understand. They're just having fun. And I want to point out two quote unquote fallacies or most common excuses, the two most common excuses people pulled. Number one, and there's been people reposted this meme, also very mechanically, the true meaning of the Tibetan phrase, eat my tongue, right? Which, first of all, he didn't say eat my tongue. He said suck my tongue, which then apologists excuse as well. He just misspoke. He doesn't know English very well. Excuse me, he's the most westernized Dalai Lama. Exactly. He knows what's appropriate or not, right? Yes. As a spiritual leader, and as an enlightened Dalai Lama incarnated in all of that. But this is fascinating because as I see this meme, it's like this meme tells people what to think and believe, right? Mm-hmm. And then, so basically it just whitewashes it in the sense of eat my tongue is just a fun phrase to show compassion, just playful nature, or just sticking out your tongue. That's fine. Sticking out your tongue to a child for fun, that's a whole different story than saying suck my tongue. But the point is, it's not the verb. It's not about, that's what people don't get. They're focused on the words and not the energy and what really happened in these few seconds.
That's the point, yeah.
And it's based on cognitive dissonance. We're going to talk about this as well, and rationalizing, intellectualizing. And also, a lot of people posted this video then, right? By this, was it a Tibetan guy or some guy?
Yeah.
Very popular video that went around on YouTube it was titled, Stop Sensationalizing the Dalai Lama's Innocent Interactions in Tibetan Perspective, where this guy says, the short video has been, falsely edited. Here's the real version. Here's the unedited version. But ironically, that video itself, which people also use to justify the Dalai Lama's actions and just playful tradition, is also heavily edited. You'd never see the whole raw footage. An unedited video would show the whole event from the point the boy goes up until the end, without cutting, without any comment overlaying it in between or over it. But in this video, this is also very heavily cut, and this guy narrating it already conditions the viewer's view via apologizing him, via saying this is just tradition, just playful nature, and shows that critical part of the video not until the end, 15 minutes later, after he already tried to convey this is just playful nature, Tibetan traditions we Westerners don't understand, and all of that. So people also mechanically reposted this, are all done and fine, right?
Yeah, it's almost like the card they're pulling is similar to like the woke card. Like it's all about culture you don't understand. I even had someone tell me that I had a white-centric opinion, and I'm actually half Asian, and my grandparents were Buddhists.
White-centric opinion on this incident?
Yeah. It was hilarious. Like, I get called a racist for like everything. Like, I can just have any opinion, and I'll always get called a racist by a white person. It always happens. Like, someone comes out of the word, and I have to say, I find it hilarious. Across the board, it's always someone that's more white than I am. It's like, so it's hilarious. So.
One more thing I want to just add to this real quick before we move on. Also, this eat my tongue thing, which this it's ironically like it's so mechanically like vertigo hive mind. Oh, just post this meme and then move on, go back to sleep.
Exactly.
And the meme literally tells people what to think. You don't even need your own words. At the end of the meme, it says, if we're honest with ourselves, we know that when we form an opinion on any topic without considering many aspects of context in any given situation, we are choosing to keep a significant degree of ignorance in our reasoning.
Yeah.
Right? Not even their own words. And like, oh, and again, it kind of escapes in the head. And we need critical thinking, but way deeper critical thinking than just reposting a meme you never researched yourself. And let's say hypothetically, with this eat my tongue, even if it's true, even if it's just this eat my tongue is a true expression from Tibet, Tibetan phrase che le sa as it's called, and just I've given you my love, my candy, like it's just playful nature. Even if that's true, this can also be used and abused with a different intention.
Yeah.
Right. And I go back to that video, and if you're in tune with your psychic somatic impression and can trust that beyond the intellectualizing, rationalizing, something is very, very off there.
Yeah. And imagine a Tibetan moves to the US under this, and he's actually a pedophile under the surface, but he goes around asking young kids on playgrounds to eat his tongue. And he says, oh, it's suck my tongue, actually. You need to suck my tongue.
Yes.
That's criminal. Like, I'm sorry. Like this is the whole thing about positively projecting on the Dalai Lama. I read about something recently called like the halo effect, where if one person has one good quality, it doesn't allow people to see any bad qualities in them. It's like the positive projection concept is that if we put it in, the thing is it's wrong to ask any child to suck your tongue. Like, this is why, like, I can't believe we actually have a conversation about this, but I get it in a sense, because if I hadn't personally gone through my own somatic healing journey around sexual abuse, I could easily go into a form of denial, because I have to say, to witness this and to watch this is pretty gross. And I've had multiple people who have been sexually abused who've messaged me and told me that it was really triggering for them to watch because it reminded them of the abuse they experienced, So if you have a huge wall of denial around sexual abuse, you will also gaslight yourself around this instance, because it will be really hard, because basically facing the creepy energy in him will make you face it in your past as well. So I think that we need to understand, when looking at a shadow like pedophilia, defense mechanisms like denial, like rationalization are built into it, because it's a really
cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, because it's a really dark and disgusting thing to look for many people to look at.
I want to also address the deeper definition and issue of cognitive dissonance in general, but I want to get to one more argument the apologists make, which is the mother was there, she was cheering, she was laughing, she was allowing it.
Yeah.
What's that's, I mean, some people like, if anybody who made this argument doesn't have an understanding of
trauma
of
at all.
Right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know for a fact in my own life and through many women I've worked with, that the mother will often collaborate with the child's abuse. And that's that secondary trauma that I spoke about, where if the child is being abused, the mother will either turn a blind eye or she'll support it. Or think of all these kids in Hollywood, for example, who end up child stars. That's perfect example is their moms often, like, actually, especially if their moms just want them to be famous because it's a free meal ticket to them, they'll just pimp them out, So number one, the mother agreeing to it is actually just a red flag for the mother. I mean, I don't think that she meant any harm. I think she's also Indian and just, worships the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama is giving her son attention. So therefore she can, like there's this like halo that goes around these spiritual figures where they can really do no wrong. And then often that's why they get surrounded by enablers. So that's one thing. And then also someone else brought up as well, by the way, it was Teal Swan who brought up this argument that, the mother was there, then everything's fine. She also brought up the fact that the kid was laughing and having fun. I was like, okay, the fawn response in trauma theory is about kind of pleasing your abuser. It's a survival mechanism. Yes. I know for myself, when I was kind of, after I had gone through some sexual trauma, I basically was fawning for the people who abused me. And it confused me until years later, until I understood the fawn trauma response. So it's basically an aspect of freeze. It's what we do. It's like Stockholm syndrome of a type. It's what you do to survive the abuse, to justify it. And that can go on for years. Like it can be really complicated because I know from my own personal experience, everything in your body is telling you something's off. So you either have to disassociate from your body, which is what a fawn response does. It gets you into freeze. But then the fawn response, like, is almost like your mind trying to like paint like another illusion on what just happened. Be like, oh, it's fine. He didn't mean to do that. It's all good, and play.
You gaslight yourself.
You gaslight yourself. Exactly.
Yeah. So this whole mother was there and she allowed it argument is completely ridiculous if you understand trauma, if you understand any other sort of abuse, even what you mentioned, where parents, mothers, fathers live through their children, pimp them out to become child stars. And all of that.
Yeah.
Or in this case, oh my God, my kid is going to be meeting the famous Dalai Lama and her projections of him and worship and not even tuning in, and all of that. And then people also claim, oh, but he raised his hand to want to be, get a hug from it. That's fine and good. You know what I mean?
He consented to a hug. He didn't consent to the other stuff.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. See it all in context. The most important part is the end of this, right before Suck My Tongue. The whole energy and everything changes and shifts.
Yeah. And also, that's a big conversation that goes on in a lot of like leftist circles, I guess you could say, is around consent in children. Because also children for a very long time, even when I was growing up, were taught, oh, you got to hug your uncle. Oh, you got to show affection. Oh, be nice,
Yeah.
So I've just noticed there's a trend deconditioning kids away from that and actually teaching them body consent, and that teaching them they don't have to hug anyone if they don't want to. If they want to hug someone and that person wants to kiss them, they don't have to. I think that this is really amazing that kids are being taught this literacy. And that's also why the Dalai Lama thing in context seems so wrong, because we're like in the Western world, now it is more about teaching kids consent. And if this is a true Tibetan value that you can just go around and ask kids to suck your tongue and it's an ancient tradition, well, then that needs to be questioned too, And I also have to say that this excuse, oh, it's just culture, you don't understand. Well, in lots of cultures, circumcision and doing all sorts of weird rituals with the baby's pee-pee is like basically also okay. And I don't agree with that either. Just because it's culture doesn't mean okay. Child brides are still acceptable in some cultures. Pedophilia is still acceptable in cultures.
Yes.
Genital mutilation is still acceptable in cultures. So I'm not going to take this excuse, oh, you're just projecting your white-centric viewpoint onto the world like this woman said. No, I'm sorry. Like I also get to say this isn't okay. Like just because it's culture doesn't mean that it's immune to any critique.
Exactly. In some Middle Eastern cultures, it's normal, traditional to marry a 12-year-old girl.
Yes,
you sell
exactly.
it. You literally sell it. You sell your daughter to some guy who buys it. And that's just tradition and culture. By the way, with this whole mother thing, parent thing, by the way, let's go back a little, see some other instances. For example, all the shoulder rubbing, hugging, and sniffing Biden has engaged in on little children, kids, boys, and especially girls, right? Who clearly felt uncomfortable. You see it in the video, and their parents are right there as well.
Yeah.
Doesn't justify it. Or all the so-called family-friendly and highly sexually explicit drag queen shows for children nowadays.
Yeah.
Where they give dollar bills, and it's highly sexualized. And the parents are there cheering as well. I mean, that's failure in parenthood. It doesn't make it okay.
Well, here's my view about it. Okay, so like I still have a variety of groups that I belong to on Facebook. And one of them is a somatic experiencing inspired group. And they're more on the side of progressive leftists, meaning like, let's teach kids about sex really young. Let's teach them about like all sorts of sexual orientations. They're more on that side. And I was really shocked. I wasn't really shocked, but I was surprised that a group of people who teach about somatic intelligence were basically taking the culture card. They were like, oh, it's just culture. We just don't understand it. There's lots of things in different cultures, that we don't really understand. And literally rationalizing what was very clear signals of the kid not wanting that affection. Like, that's all you need to know. Like, that's the whole point of developing somatic intelligence, so that you're more in tune with your body, and you can also be more in tune with the somatic intelligence of many other people. You become actually really good at reading other people's bodies through being in your body.
Yeah.
So
let's, in that note, also one big aspect of the denial or the rationalization, mental gymnastics, and justifications of, basically defending the Dalai Lama and all that is based, and it goes to many other factors. That's why it's not just about this incident about Dalai Lama in general. It's about a lot of things that happen in the world where pathologies are being normalized and just excused, right? Rationalized, justified, and all of that. But the big aspect is denial and cognitive dissonance. And I want to talk a little bit about cognitive dissonance, which I wrote about in my article on this topic as well. So basically, also you have noticed a lot of people who kind of fall into the, becoming apologists for the Dalai Lama have more like a mainstream view of spirituality or even the Dalai Lama and all of that, right? So admitting that the Dalai Lama may have acted inappropriately in a predatory fashion, and even considering that his, quote, holiness may be a pedophile with a very dark shadow and secret, and again, who knows what happens behind closed doors, is impossible for anyone who has this very socially mainstream conditioned view of him as a kind, good, spiritual person who would never do anything like that, right? The spiritual mask. These positive program projections that are socially acceptable in many pop, spiritual, and mainstream circles will override any discomfort that comes up when the core belief within oneself is questioned. So in order to buffer up and mask up this discomfort and friction within, the brain automatically looks for an excuse or rationalization to make it all good, so that the core conditioned belief in view about the Dalai loving kindness Lama is not threatened. Hence, it's just a tradition argument. It closes off any deeper insight and impression on a psychic, energetic, somatic level. It overrides it all, right? Mm-hmm. It's also very important to understand that the mechanism of cognitive dissonance is completely unconscious and mechanical. In other words, people who react that way have no idea that they're doing and would only deny it even more if you pointed it out to them. That's also why it's virtually impossible to reach people suffering from cognitive dissonance. You cannot reason with them anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's basically an unconscious psychological defense mechanism to keep the rose-colored glasses on so as not to face the lies they're telling themselves, for it would open up a can of worms leading to a disillusionment their psyche may never be able to handle. It's literally a mechanical, unconscious survival mechanism on a psychological level.
Okay, so I would really like to get into the Saturn and Pisces aspect of this, because I think this is a really important piece.
Yes, ties into that bigger picture.
Basically, Saturn entered Pisces on March 7th, 2023. It's going to be there until May 24th, 2025. But then the end of September 2025, it's going to retrograde and be in there in a little bit until basically February 13th, 2026. And I think we talked about this in another podcast. I don't know which one. I think it was the astrology of 2023, maybe.
Yes, there was one last year.
Basically, and this is really so right on cue, because the Dalai Lama has Saturn in Pisces natally, which means it's his third Saturn return about to come up. And so basically, just to kind of give people a little bit of overviews, you don't have to go back and listen to that podcast, is that Saturn represents reality, structure, and boundaries, as well as patience, self-discipline, and wisdom. So just so you know, if you're going through a Saturn transit, don't ever fear it. Just embody, face reality, create structure in your life, create boundaries, be patient, have self-discipline, be mature. And Pisces represents a dissolution of separateness and structure, as well as the oceanic feelings, imagination, dreams, and transcendence. So basically, Saturn doesn't like being in Pisces, but there's also some kind of mythical, or rather archetypal overlap with it, where Pisces represents endings and new beginnings, and Saturn stands for karma. So it's a really kind of karmic period for us to be in. And in this transit, we need to expect endings and the dissolution of old structures, which is basically the consequence of everything that's happened in the past few years. So basically, with Saturn in Pisces, our beliefs and dreams are going to be tested, and unrealistic ones will be basically shown to be empty and meaningless. So this is basically getting rid of ideologies within us. And so the next 3 years are basically a period of testing of all things Pisces. So that is a period of testing of like, who do we place our faith in? Who are the spiritual ideals that we believe in, basically? You know, we really need to sober up kind of our spiritual ideologies and things we just buy into and face reality. And I think this is such a facing reality moment, because we all have like these like projections towards like what a person like a robe or an enlightened person should act like, should look like, right?
Yeah.
And now this says reality is right in our faces, right? And some people are going more into illusion, and some people are feeling very disillusioned, basically. And that's the point of Saturn and Pisces. It's meant to create a disillusionment so that we can pop illusory bubbles and bring us back to reality. So, you know, we really want to look at like, what are our fantasies about spiritual teachers? What are our fantasies about spiritual awakening? What are our fantasies about our spiritual practice? Like, can we actually reality test all of the ideas that we have? And with Dalai Lama, his third Saturn return is meant to be a transition into eldership. And basically, all Saturn returns tend to relate to actual physical or material changes in our lives or events. It's really about maturity and taking responsibility. It makes us face a certain area of life. So the more you're used to Saturn, the better aspected Saturn is in your chart, the better these transits will go. But if you're not, you know, Saturn transits are about karma. It makes us face our fears in a certain area of life. It makes us face reality. So basically, you know, there's this concept that really helped me understand Saturn transits, which is a concept by Wendell Perry in his Saturn book, where he talks about the concept of saints and sinners. So basically what he's going to be talking about is Saturn transits can go either way. They can be really dark, or they can be periods of great accomplishment and maturity and development in your own life, basically, because Saturn basically makes us translate our wisdom into action. So they're really important life lessons. They create firm foundations for our future. They're lessons in maturity. And so what he says is that, you know, they have one group of Saturn people who he calls the saint. And these are people who make good use of their Saturn cycles. So some of them are spiritual people. Some of them are religious people. They usually devote a life to service and the advancement of human knowledge, that they want to put the willingness and the welfare of humanity ahead of their own personal needs. And the second group he calls the sinners, and these people are failing to make the best use of their Saturn transit. They often place short-term comfort and pleasure before long-term goals. They often aggrandize their egos at the expense of their altruistic concerns, and this often leaves them crippled and destroyed. And then in the public mind, they become examples of like a life poorly lived, he says. So he says, comparing these saints and sinners will help you understand how crucial Saturn transits are, because they suggest a natural growth into adulthood. They're about the person that you're meant to become. And so you can either become a more responsible, moral person, but you can also degenerate or become like a sinner under the Saturn transit as well. So you want to see how they can go either way. And this is very interesting leading up to his third Saturn return, how all of this has come out. And I'll share more about it in a moment. I'll let you speak a little bit if you would like to check in.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about more also Saturn and Pisces. So he has a Saturn returns. Saturn is also the Lord of Karma, as it's called, right?
Yes,
it's coming back around.
Yes.
But I want to hint what you mentioned, disillusion in Pisces, because it also rules faith, belief, spirituality,
yes. Okay.
of that.
So let me talk about that actually. So basically, Saturn in Pisces is about having a balanced relationship to spirituality. So you need to have that kind of childlike innocence and discernment. You need to be focused on both the spiritual and the material. It's about facing reality. So at its highest, Saturn in Pisces is like Christ consciousness, is like the heart of the Buddha. When it's stressed, Pisces is escapist and ungrounded. So, Saturn in Pisces can be and this is what he has natally, by the way, can attempt to save others, can develop a guru complex. Often Saturn in Pisces has lessons around participation in religious systems based on strict rituals and ideas like sin and punishment. It can also have lessons around meeting gurus who hypnotize you by false wisdom, or it can have lessons around being involved in a cult where you're not allowed to question anything. So what I actually see is that we're all undergoing this, and basically the Dalai Lama is like an archetypal figure of the disillusionment that we're going through in Saturn and Pisces, because this is the era that we're in. It's like meeting gurus who hypnotize us by false wisdom. There's a lot of that out there, right?
Yeah, and even dogmatic religions, lineages.
Yes,
the identification, the robe, the costume, rituals, all of that is being, put under the big magnifying glass, so to speak.
So basically, Saturn in Pisces needs to experience a connection with the divine, but without this manipulation, judgment, focus on sin, punishment. And so people with Saturn in Pisces natally tend to need to have to experience disillusionment experiences around religion. And Saturn demands that all the false beliefs need to fall. The person will need to face the raw truth. We need to go through this collectively as well, especially if that Saturn in Pisces is an important part in our chart. There basically needs to just be discernment around spirituality. There needs to be groundedness, and our faith needs to meet reality. So we're all going through this transit together, but all of these themes have a very special significance for the Dalai Lama in particular, because he is in his third Saturn return. And the last thing I just want to touch on, I'll let you wanted to say something about the history, or?
Yeah, finish up and then I can talk.
Okay. The last thing I want to touch on, because I posted a few notes on my stories when I looked at his chart, is I'll just touch on, there's a few things that happened. Number one, when this video went viral, Uranus and Mercury were basically traveling through his 11th house, which represents the internet. So a viral video represented by Mercury with Uranus traveled across the internet, and it opposed his Jupiter retrograde Scorpio in the 5th house. So he has natally Jupiter retrograde Scorpio in the 5th house, which basically Jupiter expands things. So in this case, Jupiter expands sexual desires, Scorpio 5th house, that are usually still, with children. Oh my God, that's true. That are usually stayed hidden retrograde. So this is actually shining something that's in his chart. And then one more thing I wanted to point out is that he has natally Venus, Moon, Neptune with Black Moon Lilith all conjunct in Virgo. And Lilith, so basically Venus, Moon, Neptune, he probably does have a gift of love and compassion. That's Venus and Neptune, right? I'll give him that. But Lilith there suggests that under the guise of purity, there's also a primal sexual animal part of him that's being hidden. So basically, Lilith governs our animal instincts and primal sexuality, and Lilith in Virgo wants to be perfect, and they have this strong desire to live up to other people's expectations. And this often comes from being shamed as children, because if they did anything wrong that was not aligned with the expectations of what was often a very strict religious environment, they get shamed. So then Black Moon Lilith there tends to get obsessed. What is good? What is wrong? They tend to judge themselves very harshly too. So Lilith here suggests that he did come from, it from his story, that he did come from a family that basically, rejected sexuality, spirituality had the central role. Yeah. There's no balance when Lilith is involved. It's very extreme. So Lilith in Virgo tends to indicate problems with sexuality. Often people with this placement repress it because they're taught it's shameful or have the traumatic experiences around sexuality. So Lilith is meant to be passionate and instinctive, but here there's an extreme suppression going on that's actually also conjunct Neptune. So there could be an element of deception, hiding it, etc. So that's just my own personal thoughts, just glancing at his chart.
Excellent. So also for people who know astrology, the reason we lit up because of his placements in the 5th house. The 5th house rules children, so that
and sex and romance and
all
creativity.
Of that. And Black Moon Lilith is also, hidden desires and all of that. But That points, especially with Saturn return. So thank you for sharing that, honey. And Saturn and Pisces, again, it's like bringing, a lot of corruption, distortions, and lies in spiritual traditions will be exposed on one end. In the other end, it will also be talked about in a recent podcast. More people will cling to tradition, to lineage, to dogmatic religion, which we see we've talked about the rise of a very fundamentalist Christian dogma happening in the US as well.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Clinging to it and exposure at the same time on the opposite side of the coin.
Yeah.
But what I want to bring up now, it's very interesting in light of Saturn and Pisces, it brought up with this incident Dalai Lama, the whole question about Tibet, right? And Tibetan Buddhism. And by the way, you made a good point. We will talk about this later as well. We don't want to fall into the trap of what's called psychological splitting, that the Dalai Lama is all of a sudden all evil. It's all bad.
Yeah.
He might have some good sides, like you said, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
In a certain way, but there's another side to him that just came up and to the front. It's never just black or white, just to point this out. But, I've talked about or researched Dalai Lama over 15 years ago, his connection to the CIA, being a CIA asset, because he's such a spiritual rock star on a mainstream level. He hangs out with all the psychopathic
people
and the psychopathic globalists, Bono, the Bushes, the Clintons, all of that, and just smiley face, right? But people have also this highly romanticized Hollywood version of Tibet, as all the Tibetan monks and Buddhist monks were just these peaceful, loving kindness people, just minding their own business, and then got invaded by China, and then the Dalai Lama get exiled, and poor people, and this and that, But the real history of Tibet sounds quite more gruesome, and than people are aware of. Specifically, sexual abuse in monasteries, pedophilia, slavery, and oppressive feudalism has been the norm in traditional Tibetan culture, right? And it has been conveniently ignored or edited out in the mainstream Western view of Tibet. For example, as Betsy Reed wrote in What We Don't Hear About Tibet, Tibet seems like a celestial paradise held in chains, but the West's tendency to romanticize the country's Buddhist culture has distorted our view. Popular belief is that under the Dalai Lama, Tibetans lived contentedly in a spiritual, non-violent culture, uncorrupted by lust or greed. But in reality, society was far more brutal than that vision. And then an interesting book or essay called Friendly Feudalism, The Tibet Myth by Michael Parenti. He writes, young Tibetan boys were regularly taken from the peasant families and brought into the monasteries to be trained as monks. Once there, they were bonded for life. Tashi Tsering, a monk, reports that it was common for peasant children to be sexually mistreated in the monasteries. He himself was a victim of repeated rape beginning at age 9. The monastic estates also conspired children for lifelong servitude as domestic, dance performers, and soldiers. Kim Lewis, who studied healing methods with a Buddhist monk in Berkeley, California, had occasion to talk at length with more than a dozen Tibetan women who lived in the monks' building. When she asked how they felt about returning their homeland, the sentiment was unanimously negative. At first, Lewis assumed that their reluctance had to do with Chinese occupation, but they quickly informed her otherwise. They said they were extremely grateful not to have to marry 4 or 5 men, be pregnant almost all the time, or deal with sexually transmitted diseases contracted from straying husband. The young women were delighted to be getting an education, wanted absolutely nothing to do with religion, and wondered why Americans were so naive about Tibet. And on it goes. In 1959, Anna Louise Strong visited an exhibition of torture equipment that had been used by the Tibetan overlords. There were handcuffs of all sizes, including small ones for children, and instruments for cutting off noses and ears, gouging out eyes, breaking off hands, and so forth. There were hot brands, whips, and special implements for disemboweling. The exhibition presented photographs and testimonies of victims who had been blinded or crippled or suffered amputations for thievery. So it was a very dark feudal system, with the Dalai Lama being the overlords, abusing children, having slaves, engaging in sexual abuse, pedophilia already, right? And that was, around the turn of the 1950s. Before the communists come in. And I'm not saying that the communists, I don't want to get like communists now, Chinese freed the Tibet people and then who knows? I think history is never black or white, right? But this whole Western idea that the Tibet is just this non-violent, peaceful culture is just not true. And hence, this dark shadow of their past didn't just go away. You know what I mean? With their that was basically also tradition, by the way, to get these young boys, young monks sexually abused and make them even into sex slaves.
Yeah.
And this shadow doesn't go away. It's not like they consciously ever worked on that. It's also embedded within them still.
Yeah. I've actually met, I mean, I can't even count how many stories I've heard, or even a monk that I was friends with me on Facebook, like they all seem to have sexual issues. It's like you can't just suppress this part of you and then just expect it just not to go anywhere. It causes major issues for them. And like, I've heard stories of my friends being hit on by monks, or like, being sexually approached by people in robes. Like people have all of like, the moment you put a robe on, someone thinks like you're enlightened. Like the average Westerner is like, oh, look at all this guy with all this wisdom. He's literally just wearing a robe. Like there's people who wear spiritual garb in India who are homeless just so that they can get donations. Like it doesn't mean anything, but we get so distracted by the exotic appearance that we have all of these projections and ideas around it,
Yeah, on that one thing I also really want to point out in light of shadow work. Really, most people who follow our podcast know we're big into shadow work. We need to be careful of not only negative projections, but positive projections a lot of people have onto the Dalai Lama, this idealized spiritual image, spiritual person he has, and he can only do good. He would do never any harm to anyone ever, right?
Yeah.
But indeed, everybody has a shadow, and he's not excluded from it. He's also not an enlightened being. He just got appointed, oh, you're the Dalai Lama now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Number one.
That's a good point.
But I also want to be very clear. It's very important not to fall the other. It's important to point out the evil, the potential issues, corruption, and all of that. But we need to also be careful not to project our own negative shadow even onto the Dalai Lama. Now project hate on him or on any abusers, because that's a trap from an occult level. We only feed the entities or other forces from other realms that may be even riding His Holiness, the Asura, in all of that.
Yeah.
So we need to, again, be aware of our shadow projections. So not falling into what I called before psychological splitting and see things only good or bad, black or white, because it's always a mix. On the opposite of a coin, what we've seen as well, also obviously doesn't imply taking the so-called New Age cop-out or pop spirituality, just being silent or not saying anything negative or being politically correct based on some watered-down superficial spirituality that no, evil is very real and needs to be faced, because most often, as it is written, Satan appears as an angel, right? Under this guise of all of that, denial, cognitive dissonance, and lack of shadow work keeps us at the mercy of the matrix of occult forces we have no awareness of. Because evil most often operates in the world under the disguise of goodness or kindness or charity, equality, inclusivity, sustainability, traditions, spirituality, harmless fun, and so on and so forth.
And let me say something about that.
Go
that
ahead.
Shadow work and evil has its place in the eyes of the divine. Like that's the realization I've come to in my own direct experience, reflecting on my life and how some of the people who I could label the most cruel and harmful actually contributed the most to my own awakening. So evil has its place in the eyes of the divine, and that's my own view on it. Many people think that they need to fight evil externally or eradicate evil. It doesn't mean you don't say how you feel, you don't share your opinion, but if you're externally fighting evil, the person that you're really with a battle with is the dark side of yourself. So we need to acknowledge that, like, once you do, the point of shadow work is wholeness, to accept that, can you reflect on the part of you that could be a pedophile? Could you reflect on the part of you that could be a murderer? Like, could you reflect? Basically, to do shadow work on the Dalai Lama situation is you have to put yourself in his shoes and see how this happened. And if I were to put myself in his shoes, it's very clear. You suppress the sexual nature from a very young age. He was probably also abused by other teachers in his own lineage. There you go. Like, of course, a lot of pedophiles were abused themselves. That's the whole point, right? So
But
I think that's, and I know this what I just said is going to trigger people because they're going to have an allergic response, because I'm going to the deepest level of shadow work that you can do. But if you want to really see the divine holistically, if you want to see the divine in all, you actually have to reflect on the place of evil.
Yeah. And went deep in that in our podcast episode, what facing evil can teach you. So look that up. We go deeper into that, because true shadow work is also facing the potential for evil within you. And that's what we even point out.
Yes.
It's the trap I see a lot of even truthers now project all the evil on this person, hate this guy, all the pedophiles, all externalizing evil. But true shadow work is also making the darkness conscious within you as well.
Yes.
And facing your potential for evil.
Exactly. And to understand that we all have these parts within us, at least in potential. And the more that we can reflect on it, the more that we can bring them into consciousness, the less powerful they become, because they're under our conscious control. That's the point. It's not so that it's like, oh, all is one. The pedophiles are okay. Don't shadow project on him. No. Actually, facing evil within you actually helps you face evil externally in a very direct, stark reality check way, So that's the kind of way it is. Like even some of the stuff that I talk about sexual abuse and the trauma I've experienced, a lot of this I'm talking about because I've gone through the mud and the darkness and the disgust and the anger around it, and I've come out the other side. So, this is kind of the work that we're being called to do, is that the disillusionment experience, don't get stuck projecting the evil on the world. Oh, these bad gurus, and take them all down, and the patriarchy, etc. No.
Yeah,
like
it's true.
Disillusionment is one of the most critical lessons on the spiritual path. It's written across many Vedic mantras that you need to actually remove the illusions. So if you have a disillusionment experience with a guru, with a teacher, with a Dalai Lama, or even just in life in general, that is the process of awakening.
I would also say the more you've really faced your own shadow and sincere shadow work, all these things you've suppressed, ignored, not only this lifetime, over lifetimes. That's a long process, the process of individuation. The more you can truly face evil without denial, without cognitive dissonance, and also without overlaying your own projections where you then only see evil externally, but you don't see it in yourself and you think you're all good and virtuous.
Yes, exactly. And so, I just want to close this off with really talking about a concept that I love, and this is the one that I'm taking on, is you can follow the teachings and not the teacher.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of goal that I have. I've personally, which I'll talk about in the second hour, been disillusioned multiple times. My parents grew up in a Hindu religion where the guru was basically sexually abusing young girls. I had experiences in India. I had experience in the past couple of years. So this is like anyone who's like gone seeking a guru has come across sexual abuse. It's part of the territory. And I'll explain from an evolutionary astrology perspective why that is. But when it comes down to it, we need to realize that the guru is actually the light of your own true self and its connection to the divine. So the guru that you're seeing externally is meant to introduce you back, will lead you back to your true self, connection to the divine. I would also say that what helps you develop that guru within is your own inner work, is your own spiritual work, is your own connection to your body and your spiritual practice. Because at this point that I'm at, I trust my own intuition and my body more than what any spiritual teacher has to tell me. And I personally think that I know it's the path for me, and I think it can help a lot of people, because your body and your intuition knows things that your mind cannot know. And often actually the mind tends to rationalize things away because it's full of cognitive dissonance, defense mechanisms, but the body and intuition knows the direct experience of truth. So if we use that as our guide, then we really, although we might go through uncomfortable experiences, you really can't go wrong.
Yeah, I would also say it takes some good inner work, especially on a psychological, somatic level, to really be sure you tune into your true bodily intuition.
Exactly.
Many people, it's easier said than done, just trust your intuition. Many people can mistake their own trauma responses, emotional bias, and all kinds of impressions or defense mechanisms as intuition, which is not intuition.
Yeah. So if you're normally someone who's in fight or flight or even freeze most of the time, or if you don't even know what those are, check it out. then you're most likely carrying what they say in trauma theory is stored survival stress. So you have stored trauma that's basically running in your body constantly that needs to be released. And as long as you have that being stored in your body, your whole intuition, somatic intelligence will be off. You could actually, depending on how much trauma you're carrying, you could see safe situations as dangerous and dangerous situations as safe. So what I'm speaking about is basically recovering the somatic intelligence. We're born with it. And then sometimes we lose it. Well, very often we lose it actually because we're conditioned to worship the mind over the body and the intuition. Trauma makes that worse. So we need to recover those natural instincts. And one sign that you haven't recovered those instincts, if you're in fight, flight, or freeze a lot of the time. And so that just, trauma work, like I'm a really big fan of trauma therapy. Body work, meaning yoga, meditation, even massage or qigong or whatever. For me, like if you've experienced a trauma, it will be faster healed in relationship. And that's just been my experience. As much as I've tried to do things on my own, you got to find someone to help you work that out.
Exactly. So we still have a lot to cover. In the second hour, I want to talk about how the age of religion is over, right?
Yeah.
And all of that. And really what that means implies. We also want to show off the trap, the issue just being your own teacher. There's almost, the other side around like, oh, I don't need no teacher. I'm all by myself.
You can delude yourself. So we really want to understand, go deeper in what the concept of a guru truly means within yourself or as a mentor. Mm-hmm. We also be looking more, I want to talk about the Dalai Lama because we had a podcast episode about that as well. Why spiritual teachers fell for the psyop, and we know the Dalai Lama took the jab publicly and promotes it, and how this may affect him now and future incarnation cycles, ironically, as the Dalai Lama, because we know based on the work of Thomas Meyer, the detrimental consequences of the COVID jab on the soul, spirit, and life after death, and even interfering with future incarnations. Yeah. So
deep in the occult level, we look into other, like, for example, Gandhi, again, similar story with... compared to Dalai Lama, this whole romanticized Hollywood image people have of Gandhi is not close to the truth.
And one thing I really want to cover in the beginning is I want to talk about the evolutionary spiritual state and why it tends to create a fall from grace.
Exactly. So that one, when we dive deeper into it. And what else? Oh, Krishnamurti I want to talk about is a great example. And his famous speech of truth is a pathless land. And many more, and also why, from my perspective, true evil and elite pedophilia won't be exposed anytime soon. I mean, that goes into deeper issues with the collective consciousness, where we are at as a development in humanity and much more. So tune into the second hour. If you're not a member yet, go to my website, veilofreality.com, and you can sign up there to have access to all the second hours, over 100 episodes. See you soon.